I leaned back in the leather chair of my corner office, the city skyline stretching out before me like a painting of glass and steel. Sunlight spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the soft sheen of my silk blouse. My assistant had just placed a fresh cup of coffee on my desk, its rich aroma curling into the air, but I hadn't touched it yet. My phone buzzed. I glanced down at the screen, and there it was. His name. For a second, I just stared, my perfectly polished nails frozen above the glass surface. It had been years since I'd seen that name. Years since the man behind it laughed in my face, brushed aside my ideas, and told me I'd never make it in this business. Now the irony made me almost smile. He didn't know yet. He didn't know that the company he'd once ruled with arrogance, the one where I was just a silenced voice in a crowded room, now belonged to me. My heart beat steady, not from nerves but from something sharper, anticipation. I had spent too long preparing for this day, and it was finally here. I took a slow sip of my coffee, savoring the heat, and whispered to myself, "Let's see if he still thinks I don't belong at the table." I wasn't always this calm. Back then, my hands used to shake whenever I carried a folder of ideas into the conference room. I was the youngest woman on the team, desperate to prove myself, but also terrified of being wrong. That day is still etched into me, the sharp scent of dry erase markers, the whir of the projector, the stiffness of the pencil skirt I'd bought on clearance because it made me feel professional. I had stayed up for nights working on a pitch, pouring every ounce of creativity into it. When my turn finally came, I stood tall, or at least I tried to. This campaign, I began, my voice trembling slightly, isn't just about numbers. It's about connection. If we tell the story through real people. But I didn't even finish. He, my boss, Mr. Daniels, leaned back in his chair, smirk tugging at his lips. "Cute idea," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "But we're not here to play story time, sweetheart. Stick to the spreadsheets." The laughter that rippled around the table stung worse than the words. My throat tightened. I felt the heat rush to my face, and all I could do was press my nails into my palm to keep from crying right there in front of them. After the meeting, I went to the restroom, locked myself in a stall, and let the tears fall silently. I hated myself for crying, but more than that, I hated that he'd taken my voice and crushed it so easily. That evening, I called my grandmother. She always seemed to know when my spirit was broken. She listened quietly, then said something I'll never forget. "Darling, if someone is too blind to see your brilliance, don't dim yourself. Find a place where your light can shine." She mailed me a small silver pendant the very next week, a tiny compass. "So you'll never lose your direction," she wrote on a note. The very next month, I handed in my resignation letter. My boss didn't even look up when I placed it on his desk. He just shrugged, like losing me was nothing. He had no idea what that moment truly meant. It wasn't an ending. It was the start of everything. Walking away from that office was terrifying. I remember clutching my box of belongings, a half-dead plant, a stack of notebooks, and that little compass pendant resting on top, and wondering if I'd just ruined my life. The first few months were brutal. I rented a tiny apartment with peeling paint and a leaky faucet that kept me awake at night. My desk was an overturned milk crate with my old laptop balanced on it. Dinner was usually instant noodles or a peanut butter sandwich. Some nights, I cried myself to sleep, asking if I'd made a mistake. But in those quiet, desperate hours, something burned inside me. I refused to go back. I refused to be silenced again. I spent every spare minute reading, learning, and building. Marketing blogs, online courses, late-night tutorials, anything that would sharpen my skills. By day, I worked odd jobs to pay rent. By night, I sketched out campaign ideas and emailed potential clients who rarely answered. Then came the first yes. A small bakery owner downtown agreed to let me run a social media campaign. The budget was laughable, but I treated it like gold. I poured everything into it, the visuals, the storytelling, the heart. And when their sales doubled within a month, I knew I was onto something. Word spread slowly, but it spread. Another client came, then another. My tiny apartment turned into a buzzing command center, sticky notes covering the walls, coffee cups scattered like trophies of survival. Still, the weight of doubt lingered. One night, staring at my dwindling bank account, I whispered to myself, maybe he was right. Maybe I'm not enough. That was the night I met Carla. She was an industry veteran, sharp, fearless, the kind of woman who commanded a room without raising her voice. She'd seen my work for the bakery and reached out. "You've got talent," she told me over coffee, her lipstick perfect, her presence magnetic. "But you're playing small. Stop hiding. Own your brilliance." Carla became my mentor. She pushed me harder than anyone ever had, tearing apart my drafts, making me redo pitches until they gleamed. But she also believed in me when I didn't. With her guidance, I landed my first major client, a regional clothing brand. The campaign was bold, risky, the kind of thing my old boss would have laughed out of the room. But it worked. Sales skyrocketed. My name started circulating in rooms I had only dreamed of entering. Yet online, I stayed modest. My social media posts were vague, a picture of coffee, a quote about perseverance, never details of the contracts I was signing or the accounts I was handling. Part of me wanted to keep the surprise tucked close to my chest, hidden like a secret weapon. Years passed. The girl with the trembling voice became a woman who knew her worth. My apartment turned into an office. My office turned into a firm. And my firm grew strong enough to do the unthinkable, acquire the very company that once told me I didn't belong. And now my old boss was about to find out. The boardroom doors were tall, heavy, and lined with glass that caught the reflection of the city skyline. I stood inside, hands resting lightly on the polished table, waiting. The walls were lined with framed art, not just expensive pieces, but meaningful ones. A photograph of my grandmother smiling in her garden. A sketch of my very first bakery campaign. And on the far wall, mounted in silver, the compass pendant she had given me all those years ago. My anchor. My reminder. The door swung open. He walked in, flanked by a handful of executives who still carried that smug air of superiority. Mr. Daniels hadn't changed much, still broad-shouldered, still wearing his arrogance like a tailored suit. He scanned the room casually, not even looking in my direction at first. "Where's the new management?" he asked, setting down his briefcase as though he owned the place. I let the silence stretch, a small smile tugging at the corner of my lips. Finally, he looked at me, and for the briefest moment, confusion flickered across his face. "Hello, Mr. Daniels," I said, my voice calm, steady. "It's been a long time." His brow furrowed. "Wait, you?" He let out a short, incredulous laugh. "What are you doing here?" "Taking notes for the new CEO." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I gestured toward the chair opposite me. "Why don't you sit?" He sank into the seat, still chuckling, though I could see the unease beginning to creep into his expression. The other executives followed, glancing around the room at the subtle details they didn't yet understand. Finally, I leaned forward, lacing my fingers together. "You asked where the new management is. You're looking at her." The room went still. At first, he blinked, as if the words hadn't registered. Then he barked a laugh, loud, forced. "You're joking." "I'm not." My tone stayed even, but there was steel underneath. "This company, your company, was acquired last month. By my firm. Which means, Mr. Daniels, you now work for me." The laughter died. His face drained of color. One of the executives coughed awkwardly, shifting in his chair. Another glanced at the compass on the wall, realization dawning. I stood, walking slowly around the table, heels clicking against the marble floor. "Do you remember the last time we sat across from each other in a meeting? You dismissed my ideas. Called them cute. Told me to stick to spreadsheets." I paused, letting the memory hang in the air. Those same ideas? They're the backbone of the campaigns that built my firm, the campaigns that made enough money to buy this company outright. His jaw clenched, his knuckles whitening as he gripped the armrest of his chair. This is absurd," he stammered. "No," I said softly, leaning close enough that he could see the calm certainty in my eyes. "This is justice." The silence in the room was deafening. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to fade. One by one, the executives shifted their gaze from him to me, recognition settling in, along with something else. Respect. I straightened, smoothing the sleeve of my blouse, and returned to my seat at the head of the table. My seat. Let's begin, I said, opening the folder in front of me. And just like that, the power had shifted. I let the silence linger just a moment longer, savoring the weight of it. Then I folded my hands neatly on the table and looked around at every face in the room. Here's how this is going to work, I said, my voice steady measured. The company will continue forward, but under a new culture, one that values every voice at this table, not just the loudest one. Some of the executives nodded quickly, eager to align themselves with me. Others shifted uncomfortably, stealing glances at Mr. Daniels, who sat stiff and pale, like a king stripped of his crown. I turned to him directly. As for you, Mr. Daniels, you'll stay on if you choose. But under conditions. His eyes narrowed. Conditions? Yes. I leaned back in my chair, crossing one leg over the other. First, you will no longer dismiss or belittle the ideas of your staff, especially the women and the younger employees. Every suggestion gets heard, documented, and considered. Second, you will attend leadership training sessions. I've already arranged them. And third, I paused, letting the words fall heavy. You will work under me.
Report to me. Answer to me.
Just as I once answered to you. The muscle in his jaw ticked. His pride was swallowing him alive. But he didn't argue, not this time. He knew he had no ground to stand on. I shifted my gaze to the others. Each of you also has a choice. If you want to stay, you'll be part of building something healthier. That means accountability, collaboration, and respect. No more cutting corners, no more toxic hierarchies. If that doesn't work for you, there's the door. A hush fell over the table. One by one, heads nodded. Some with sincerity, some with reluctance, but all with understanding. I softened my tone just slightly, letting a thread of compassion weave through. I'm not here to destroy. I'm here to rebuild. But I won't tolerate the same old patterns. This company nearly collapsed under arrogance and blindness. If we're going to rise again, it will be because we changed together. I saw the shift then, in their eyes, in their posture. A recognition that this wasn't revenge, it was leadership. The kind they had never known here before. Finally, I looked back at Mr. Daniels. You once told me I didn't belong at this table. But today, I'm not just at the table. I gestured around the room. I own the table. His lips pressed into a thin line, and for the first time, he dropped his gaze. The man who once smirked at my trembling hands now sat silent, humbled, forced to face the reality that the girl he ignored had grown into the woman who now held his future in her hands. And I wasn't going to waste that power. In the weeks that followed, the company began to shift. Slowly but noticeably. Meetings no longer felt like battlegrounds. Voices once silenced began to speak up with confidence. Junior staff, especially young women, brought ideas to the table without fear of being laughed at. And for the first time, those ideas were nurtured, not crushed. Even Mr. Daniels changed. He sat through the leadership training with clenched teeth at first, but gradually, something softened. He began listening more, speaking less. The arrogance didn't vanish overnight. Pride like his doesn't evaporate so easily, but he had been humbled, and humility left cracks for growth to seep in. Sometimes, I caught him watching me across the table, his expression unreadable. Regret? Admiration? Maybe both. But I no longer cared for his validation. My worth wasn't his to define. One evening, long after the office had emptied, I lingered in the boardroom. The city lights glittered outside, and the compass pendant on the wall caught the glow of the skyline. I walked over, running my fingers lightly across its cool surface. I thought of my grandmother, of her words, her faith in me when I had none in myself. Don't dim your brilliance. Find where your light can shine. Tears pricked at my eyes, but this time, they weren't from pain. They were from gratitude. For the struggles, the sleepless nights, the failures that carved me into the woman I had become. For the journey that turned humiliation into strength and silence into power. I turned off the lights, the boardroom falling into shadow except for the city's glow. As I stepped out, I whispered the truth I now carried like armor, a truth that once felt impossible but now defined me. He ignored my ideas, but now, the entire company runs on them.